Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with beef goulash. That's right, I'm using an old Wolfgang Puck recipe of this amazing beef stew. And while he's not Hungarian, he is Austrian. And since I've never been to that part of Europe, I'm going to assume they're pretty much the same thing, okay? And while I really don't know if that's true, what I do know is if there was a beef stew hall of fame, this would have an entire wing dedicated to it. It's that amazing. So here's how you do it. First up, we're going to cut up some beef chuck. Do not buy stew meat. All right, cut it yourself. Get the cheapest hunk of beef chuck you can find and just cut it up in like fork-sized pieces. And you see all that connective tissue? That's why this is so delicious. It's also why it takes a couple hours to simmer, but totally worth it. And of course, the other reason you want to cut your own is because when you buy it pre-cut from the market, those are the pieces they literally can't sell any other way. And you're paying extra for the privilege. So just cut your own. It's really easy. Once you've cut it up, we're going to go ahead and season that with some salt and black pepper. All right, I'm going to spread that out and do it right on the board. Give that a toss. And then once that's seasoned, we're going to sear that and brown that for a few minutes on each side in a very hot skillet with a little bit of vegetable oil on high heat. I'm going to do half at a time. I don't want to crowd it. I want a nice brown on there. All right, as they brown, I'm just going to toss them right into my stew pot. Okay, I'm going to add in the second batch. And once all your beef chunks are browned, we're going to go ahead and saute our onions, and we're going to use the exact same pan. Why waste all that deliciousness? All right, so put that back on medium heat. Add in your onions that I very roughly chop, nice big pieces. All right, this is a rustic stew. And rustic, if you check the Chef to English dictionary, means do not spend a lot of time on the precision cuts. Just whack that thing up, add it to the pan with a little drizzle of olive oil, big pinch of salt, and we're going to cook that for 5 or 6 minutes. I don't need to cook it all the way through. This is going to simmer for a couple hours, but I do want to get the edges nice and golden brown. That's going to add some beautiful sweetness and color to the stew. So I'm going to transfer our onions into the stew pot, and once again, do not wash that pan because we're going to toast the spices in there. So just set the pan aside while you prep your spices. And one of the signature spices in goulash is caraway. And there they are, little caraway seeds. I'm going to throw a couple teaspoons in a mortar and pestle and crush it up. You could use a spice grinder, but it was just a little bit, so that's an easy way to do it. I'm going to dump my ground caraway seeds into our dry but still dirty pan, along with some paprika. Hopefully it's Hungarian, but if you have to use Spanish paprika, no problemo. I'm also going to toss in some black pepper, some dry marjoram, some dry thyme, and some cayenne. I'm going to put the heat on medium, and I'm going to toast those spices in the dry pan for about 3 or 4 minutes. But don't necessarily go by time. You want to keep stirring, moving it around the pan until you can just sort of barely smell that caraway seed toasting. We certainly don't want to burn these spices, but we do want to wake them up with that heat. It really does make a difference. So after 3 or 4 minutes of toasting, I decided mine were perfect. I'm going to deglaze with a cup of chicken broth. That's going to stop the cooking process and, of course, release all that amazing goodness from the bottom of the pan, from the meat and the onions, and, of course, these last ingredients. We're going to dump that into the stew pot. All right, along with some tomato paste, some very finely crushed garlic, and 1 bay leaf that for some reason I dipped into the tomato paste first. Sometimes I do things for no reason. A little bit of salt. And then we're going to add the rest of our chicken broth, a little bit of sugar, like a teaspoon, just to balance the acidity from the tomato paste, and this next ingredient, which is a little bit of balsamic vinegar. All right, we're going to give that a stir. I'm not sure why I'm using the freakishly small wooden spoon. If that thing snapped, I would have to quit YouTube. All right, so I should be using a bigger spoon, but that's okay. Sometimes you got to live dangerously. And then stop me if you've heard this before. Put the heat on high, bring it up to a simmer, and then back the heat down to low, maybe just over low, to maintain a steady simmer. You don't want a rolling boil, but you do want it simmering pretty good. And then we're going to simmer this for about 1.5 hours. All right, I don't cover mine. I like to watch it and smell it. If it looks like the liquid level's getting a little low, I'll add a splash of stock or water. No problem there. And after about 1.5 hours, it's going to look something similar to this, I hope. All right, and then we're going to evaluate. We're going to take a fork. We're going to test the doneness of the meat. All right, I want the fork to go in the meat fairly easily, yet I don't want the meat totally falling apart. So let me check this. And that was almost there. I figured I needed about 10-15 more minutes of cooking, which was perfect because I did want to reduce the liquid a little more. So I cranked the heat up to medium. I cooked that for another 10 or 15 minutes, which left me with this. One of the most gorgeous beef stews you will ever see. Look at that color. And by the way, promise me you're going to taste this for salt and pepper. All right? And I apologize for the steam. Let me try another angle. And yes, that's even worse. But you get the idea. The meat's tender. The sauce is thickened. And once we're happy with that, we can serve it up on whatever. I like buttered noodles. Some people do rice, potatoes. This is good on pretty much anything. And of course, you got to clean up your drips, which is what I did there. I'm going to finish with a spoon of sour cream. And because I had it and I used the dried version in the stew, I'm going to top with some fresh marjoram. And that is done. Beef goulash. And by the way, I'm sure we have lots of confused Americans right now who thought goulash was a hamburger and elbow macaroni casserole. That's not what this is. This is the real deal, or at least my version of the real deal. Old world comfort food at its finest. That soft, succulent, sticky beef, that rich, aromatic, paprika-based sauce. Like I said at the beginning, one of the world's great beef stews. So I really hope you give that a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.